Hello again, and welcome to another Tidbits of Safety with Sorensen Wilder and Associates. I'm Steve Wilder, joined today by Dan Wilder, Vice President of Operations, and Glenn Nixon, our Senior Security Specialist. For those of you that are wondering, I want to clarify, Dan and Glenn are not twin brothers, even though they may look like it a little bit today.
I'm much younger than Glenn is.
You're much younger, okay, and much better looking, you would normally tell me. But like everybody, Glenn and Dan are both working from home, and I'm in the office in an empty office building, so I'm relatively safe as well. Kind of a sensitive subject today that we're going to talk about, and that is the risk of and the presence of domestic violence and the spike that communities are seeing in domestic violence calls during the shelter in place, the home quarantine, the confinement, whatever term you want to use. The results is there have been a spike in domestic violence calls. Those of you that may not know Glenn on a personal level, he probably served as a law enforcement officer for 23 years. He's a retired police sergeant and still has frequent contact with the law enforcement community. And Glenn, I think you told me not too long ago that one law enforcement agency you talked to had seen an 800% spike in domestic violence calls. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's true. Yeah, there's been an enormous spike in the amount of calls, and that's not indicative of past reliability on studies. But even as soon as August of 2019, University of Louisville in Kentucky, a study found that 1 in 4 females experienced some form of domestic violence in their lifetime. Even more shocking, 1 in 6 females experienced a stalker at least once in their lifetime. It's not uncommon to see at least one of your employees right now at your facility actively involved in some type of domestic violence issue at home. And especially, we're going to see those numbers rise even more now that we've got this containment at home and the stress and the financial issues. All those things play a role in the dramatic increase in domestic violence.
Dan, Glenn mentioned a couple of really what I consider critical factors there. Just the fact that we're being caged in, if you will. I don't know if people like that term, but I'm not necessarily here to be politically correct. I'm just being honest and speaking from the heart. People are feeling I heard one person say they felt like they were on house arrest. And it is getting that way. And there's stress from job loss. There's stress from parents being in positions they've never been in before. What about that stress? How do we deal with that?
Well, the stress it's definitely there, whether it's whether it's from trying to homeschool your kids, which is a whole new experience, or like you said, the stress of
experience.
What's that?
Is that the voice of experience?
Well, my kids are too young for school homework right now, so I'm still kind of lucky on that one. But judging from conversations with my sister and with some other friends, it is definitely a challenge and a little off topic, but I think next year Teachers Appreciation Day will be much nicer gifts for the teachers next Christmas. But getting back to how can we deal with it? We all got to find that center for what's going to help us relieve our stress. On the home front, we can talk to our employees about that. How do we relieve stress at home? How do we get away? Taking the time outs, things of that nature. But if there is the threat at the office or at the facility, we should probably get that communicated so it doesn't bleed over. Communicating it with our employees that if you do come forward, you're not going to risk losing a job. You're not going to be segregated or talked about, or it's not going to be publicized throughout everywhere. This is an embarrassing topic. It's embarrassing. We don't want to admit that we are being assaulted at home. So let's keep it a secret, and let's not. But then now it's becoming an issue at work because they know where we live, they know where we work, they can come and get us. Talking about it with your coworker or talking about it with the supervisor so they can set up levels of protection for you at work, or look out post or whatever we need to do. I'll keep it safe.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. One of the things, and I hope, I think all of you who would be receiving this video received an article we put together a week or two ago that talked about managing the return to work. And what I worry about is an increase in incidents of workplace violence in the workplace when workers start to come back. In most industries, it's not going to be all or none. It's going to be a phased approach, and I don't think workers realize that at this point. So one of the things, though, in that article, I had the privilege of engaging a local psychotherapist who's been a friend for years, Dr. Peggy Piper. And one of the things that Dr. Piper said in that article that resonates so loudly with me is that anger is usually the result of fear. People are fearing something, they can't control it, they feel a total loss of control, and the resulting emotion is anger. So one of the underlying things to look for is definitely the root cause, and the old risk manager in me comes out. But look for the root cause. Look for what is it that they are fearing that is causing their anger to spike. Again, as I've said, this COVID virus that's done this to so many people, to so many families, to so many workplaces, there's nobody to blame. We don't know where it came from. We don't know if it's naturally occurring. We don't know if it's man-made. You can pick up 10 different pieces of media and get 10 different opinions. There's nobody to blame, though. Usually when something bad happens, guys, there's somebody to blame. And in this case, there's not. So we don't even have anybody that we can focus the anger on. So that just really starts to intensify it. Glenn, the person who's in a situation in the home front, and I'll fall back on your expertise in this subject as a law enforcement professional too. The employee, male, female, doesn't matter, who is dealing with domestic violence in the home because of all the stress and everything Dan just talked about. When that escalates into the workplace, what are some of the things that, and lack of a better term, Glenn, guys, I'll call him the abuser. To be able to escalate it, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up. And oftentimes we're seeing it, they're taking it out on their partner, right, wrong, or indifferent. They're taking it out on their partner. How does that abuser get into the workplace?
Well, we all know that it's against the rules for non-employees to use employee doors, and for spouses to be right, for spouses to be on the property of the facility. But it happens all the time, and it's been happening all the time. Look, the spouses or the partners know that there's a certain door that they can go to, or the loading dock, or they know the weak spots of your facility. They also know the other employees of the facility. It may be something as simple as holding up the lunch bag, and they know how to be nice. They know how to turn the charm on to get into the facility to get what they want. And sometimes they want the control over their partner. And it could be occurring in the parking lot, in the bushes next to their car. People generally park close to the same proximity where they always park every day. They know what door they go into. The spouses, the partners know what part of the building they work in sometimes. So it may be a lot easier to talk to a resident and sweet talk one of the residents to walk in one of the patio doors, the sliding doors, the loading docks, the weak spots that we always find open doors when we do security vulnerability assessments. These are the sensitive spots. And the abuser, as you so eloquently said, knows how to play the game to get themselves into the building. Once they get into that open door, who knows what they're going to do.
Right. And we've certainly seen everything from simple acts of verbal abuse to coming in carrying a firearm, and the event, shifting and transitioning into an active shooter event. So, once they're in the building, who knows what's going to happen. Let's talk a little bit about managing risk. In risk management, we teach 5 steps in what we call the risk management process. The first one is exposure avoidance, which clearly this is what we want to do here. We want to keep that abuser, we'll continue to use that term if I may. We want to avoid the exposure by keeping them out of the workplace. But we know, as you just said, Glenn, that doesn't always happen. So then we go to the second method, which is risk control techniques. And Dan, I guess I'll focus on you. Where do we start? I mean, how do we start controlling the risk? What are some things we can be doing? what are some of the things our facilities can be doing to start controlling the risk or lessening the risk?
Yeah. Most importantly is education. Training our people that their job is safe. They're not going to be segregated or ostracized for coming forward. It's not going to be uncommon for the abuser to also mentally abuse them. If you go forward and you tell anybody at work that this is happening, they're going to fire you and you will have nothing. If you leave me, you will have nothing. Letting them first off know that they're there. We're here to help you also. You come forward, we're going to protect you. Then we need to educate our supervisors. How can we recognize it? Because again, it's embarrassing and most people are not going to come forward. They're going to try to keep it a secret. And how can we recognize it? Do we see little changes in behavior? Do we see employees that are crying? Do we hear it around the coffee pot? People are talking about it. If it is, can we approach that person? Do we have a good enough relationship to talk with our employee and say, hey, we've noticed some things are going on. Is everything okay? We want to help you. Then we have to educate them again on how do we respond when they say, yeah, my husband last night hit me with his belt or did this or said they're going to, if I tell anybody, he's going to come to work and he's going to kill me and everybody here. How do we respond to that? Those are the things that we need to start looking at right away.
One of the things, and again, I'll refer back to that article, Dr. Piper, one of the things that she emphasized so emphatically is the use of employee assistance programs. Most all organizations have some type of an employee assistance program in place. And boy, if there's ever been a time when it should be being utilized, this is it, because we've got a workplace crisis, and for many of our employees, they're dealing with family crisis. So, you get a double whammy effect there. So, that's one of the things too to drive home is to use the employee assistance program that you have in place. If you don't have one, most all communities have very qualified psychotherapists or counseling programs in place. Want to make sure you get a qualified counselor. Not wanting to sell, but if you don't have anything, call us. We'll put you in touch with somebody. We've got a nice network. So we're not going to leave you stranded. We'll find you somebody. Glenn, Dan mentioned a minute ago, coming forward, how do we encourage employees to report what's private, what's going on in the home, when there very well is a risk it could escalate into the workplace? I'm trying to word this right.
Well, that's a good question, Steve, and it falls hand in hand with what Dan was saying. It's up to the supervisors first and foremost to recognize those cautionary factors, and keep in mind, in all but 3 states in the United States, healthcare workers are mandated reporters, and that falls to your employees too. So you're mandated to do something to help them. So to encourage the employees, it starts again early on in orientation. It establishes that we are here with a strong domestic violence policy, and here's what we're going to do to gather around our employees when they're victimized at home or at work, at the workplace. We're going to gather around the victim, support, and make sure we provide them with resources to help them deal with the issues, not just at workplace, but also at home. So they know this, because the abuser uses mental torment also. He knows if they find out that you're being abused, they're going to drop you. You're going to lose your insurance. You're going to lose your income. And I'm going to take the kids and I'll be out of here and you'll have nothing. You won't have a job. You won't have a place to live. That's that control mechanism that, that we talk about so much in that circle of domestic violence, that cycle. Yeah. And to remove that, the workplace can be the supporting factor for them. Initially, that workplace establishes the policy that we're not going to terminate. We are going to gather around and we're going to support you. And we have systems in process with the EAP and providing resources to make sure we do the right thing for our employees and support our employees. And then prove that ongoing information, and then prove that over and over again when instances do come up. Immediately reply and put the practices and the protection measures into place. What we need to do is focus on communication with that. We plan, we protect, because you put all of this emphasis and all this money into your investment of time and money into your employees. So let's protect that. Let's not start all over again with a new employee. Let's take care of what we have. Let's be proactive. And Sorensen Wilder Associates has an employee communication tool called We Care. And it's 49 messages, one sent out every day to our employees. And it's designed to build employee morale. And many of those messages fall on the personal development side of things and building that strength with their employer all throughout life struggles, inside the facility and outside at home. And that builds a stronger employee, and it builds dedication to their employer. And that improves your work quality. And that's kind of what we're after. When you've got happier employees that are taken care of, and this isn't financial, this is all about emotional and making your employees feel validated and valued. And that creates better care for your residents and your clientele.
And OSHA says very clearly that as the employer, we have the obligation to identify the hazards that the employee is exposed to in the workplace. Domestic violence can certainly be recognized, should be included on every hazard vulnerability assessment that's done, should be included in every security vulnerability assessment that's done. Dan, I don't know if you remember years ago, I'm going to go in our Wayback Machine. You and I visited a hospital. This was before Glenn was with us. You and I visited a hospital out in Virginia, and they had a policy, a domestic violence policy, which I was thrilled to see, with a mandatory reporting requirement for any employee who was the subject of domestic violence in the home. And it clearly said in that policy, which was in the employee handbook, that this was a condition of employment. Now, not being an attorney, I don't know if that's legal or not. I have my own suspicions that it probably would not be. But I think it was noble on their part what they're trying to accomplish there. They know that domestic violence in the home escalates into the workplace. They know that it not only compromises the safety and well-being of the abused employee, but also the patients, the residents, the visitors, the other people who might be in the building, vendors, anybody else in the building at the time can become a victim then. So, their intent was certainly noble, but we have something in place out there, gang, that encourages your employees to report. Dan and Glenn have both beat that one home, and I will too. We can't do anything about it until then. One of the other things that I would encourage you to do too, everybody under the OSHA guidelines has to have a workplace violence prevention program. And I would urge you to incorporate either a subsection in your workplace violence prevention plan or a separate domestic violence prevention plan, and address these issues in there, and do your own security assessment in terms of steps that you can take. If I'm your employee, I come to you, I report that I'm the victim of domestic abuse in the home and I fear for my safety in the workplace. What are things that you can do for me in the workplace to lessen the likelihood of me becoming a victim of domestic violence in the workplace? So guys, again, I appreciate your participation. We get great feedback on these from our clients and friends, and I appreciate being able to put them out there during these challenging times. Friends, as I close every session and say, we're here for you. We're here to help you. We're here to, whatever you need from us, we're here for you. As I say often, we're not your attorney. You'll never get a bill for a 15-minute phone call. So feel free to give us a call, 800-568-2931. As I always say, stay safe and stay in touch.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Good night.